Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. It's been a really tough time for small businesses. A global pandemic, supply chain shortages, rising inflation and interest rate hikes. The financial waves could really be crashing hard. So if debt is becoming an overwhelming issue, what can you do? Well, Helen Davis can help. She's the General Manager of the Small Business Debt Helpline and says that the organisation's free financial counsellors are available to assist, especially when personal and business finances have become entwined. Helen starts by describing the small business debt landscape to Jeff Waters.
From what we see, it's a really tough time for small businesses. And the big contributor to that is they're coming off the back of a series of disasters that have impacted them. So for many of them, the history of our line is we started in response to the 2019-20 bushfires. Very quickly after that, there was COVID, lockdown. We've seen floods, droughts, businesses impacted by mice plagues, all sorts of things. And very often it's a multitude of things. So they're emotionally and financially, their reserves are gone. So that's a difficult starting point. And very specifically at the moment, what we're seeing is a perfect storm of debts. There's this concertinaing effect of where people might have had some assistance and support during the lockdown periods. It's all stopped at once. So typically what we're seeing is this concertinaing of ATO debts, their finance arrangements, and very often a commercial or retail lease where they've had some moratoriums or hardship arrangements in place during that time of COVID, and now all those debts are being called in at once. So the immediate challenge we're seeing facing the small businesses calling us is managing those outstanding debts. You then put on top of that what might be happening in the economic environment and markets more broadly, which the things we see there starting to impact people is supply chain issues, changes to their cost bases, and in many cases some changes in consumer behaviour. People aren't necessarily purchasing the things they used to purchase 2 years ago.
Wow, you started as a result of the 2019 bushfires and you have really had your work cut out for you since then, haven't you? Can you tell me how the recent increase in interest rates is affecting things?
Yeah, really interesting question, and it definitely has an impact. It's almost an indirect impact in that if you think of small businesses are families. So the immediate impact many of them are feeling is actually on their personal finances and their home loans and those arrangements. In terms of their business financing, we don't see it as such a direct impact. And I think some of the reason for that is we see people have locked themselves into finance arrangements with some fairly exorbitant and frankly outrageous terms. So the interest rates are so far from the official rate to start with. So we see things in the order of between 27 to 300% equivalent annual interest rates. So that dwarfs any change in the official rate. The other impact, of course, that the change in the interest rates is having is back to the point I raised about consumer behaviour. Industry where there's some discretionary spend type of component are definitely seeing the impact through on their revenue line.
Yes, so the Reserve Bank is trying to stop us all from spending, and of course that must be having impact on the bottom line for small business.
So for some businesses where there's that discretionary consumer spend, it's one of the things people first start to tighten the purse strings on. So yes, that's having an impact. The other way we see it having an impact is where for small businesses, one of the challenges is they're having to juggle, do I pay my supplier? Do I pay my financer? Do I pay my home rent or mortgage? So where they're starting to make those choices, there can be a knock-on effect to the timeliness of the cash flow that small businesses are receiving, which in turn impacts their ability to pay what they owe on time. And where we're seeing this perfect storm of the three large debts that people are facing, all needing to be paid over a relatively short time frame, that tension on someone's cash flow coming in is felt in a very visceral, difficult way.
You know, Mazars have been a long-time supporter of SoundCartel, and now they're helping us bring you this podcast. To find out how Mazars can support your business, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
How are you and the Small Business Debt Helpline helping people?
So the way we help is for people calling us, they'll get directly through to a financial counsellor, or if they use our chat function, it will be answered by a financial counsellor. Financial counsellors will work to listen to somebody, and a lot of the feedback we get is just the value in that non-judgmental listening ear. We'll work through with the person to go, well, what are the priorities here? Let's take the great big elephant and bite it down to one chunk at a time. And then having those priorities in place, what are the things that can be done to help?
So in a general sense, what do the financial counsellors do? What sort of advice do they give you?
They'll work with you to understand what's important to you as a person, which is perhaps a little bit different from a financial advisor or accountant. What are the things causing you the most distress and anguish at the moment? They'll factor in your personal and mental well-being as well as your financial well-being, so acknowledging there's a nexus between those two things. Practically what that might sort of turn to looking to is talking through what are some options you might have to manage different debts. Ideally, the earlier someone reaches out to us, the more options they're going to have. So it may be communicating with people, it may be negotiating, advocating, it may be talking through dispute resolution services that are available, right through to if someone's calling very late in the day, they may have letters of demand, court judgments, explaining what those mean, what are the next steps that a person's going to be facing. And that being informed can be quite a powerful thing for people.
And you say that the earlier the better that people contact you. What are the sort of triggers that I should recognise to lead me to calling you?
Yeah, so the comment about the earlier you call us, the better is generally the earlier someone calls us, the broader the range of options they're going to have. So in terms of the things that you might recognise are if you're feeling really distressed, and a thing we'll commonly hear from people is they can't open their mail. They're scared of what's going to be coming in the door. They're not necessarily early triggers, but they're a common trigger for something ringing us. If you're in an industry that's got lumpy type of payment cycles, if you're starting to use deposits but to cover the costs for jobs that you've previously done, if you're recognising that cash flow tension sitting there, that's a good trigger to call through to us. Very often for people it's shows practically as in I've got all these different bills to pay, which one is it that I should pay? One of the things that we hear people say that I so hope people would ring up the phone before they did this is they'll say, I know I shouldn't have, but I was very, very desperate. So a message I'd love to get out to small businesses is if you're in a desperate circumstance and you're feeling pressured, take a deep breath, pick up the phone, have a chat to someone like our service, and then make your decision after that.
The first question that anybody listening to this is going to ask is, are there any costs involved?
No, there aren't. So in terms of the Small Business Debt Helpline and all financial counselling services, they're free, they're confidential, and the financial counsellors care.
So who pays for it?
So the Small Business Debt Helpline is funded by the federal government, and we're operated by Financial Counselling Australia, which is the peak body for financial counsellors, and a not-for-profit organisation.
That's terrific. So if I do want to call you, if somebody's listening and they're not opening their mail, which is classic avoidance behaviour, how do we find you? Where do we contact you?
So pick up the phone. The number's 1800 413 828. And there's also a chat function on our website, which is sbdh.org.au.
And it's completely confidential?
Completely confidential and free.
And if my finances for my business are tied up, for instance, in my home as well, and my home is becoming threatened, you can help me with that?
Yes, and that's something we really commonly see on the support line is that the small business finances and the personal liabilities, personal finances become very entwined. And one of the services and ways we do help people is actually to talk through with them what personal assets might be at risk for them, what liabilities they might take on, We commonly see people have a misunderstanding that, well, I run my business through a company, so my home is safe, and they don't realise that, for example, they've given a personal guarantee on the loan they've taken out and that potentially their home is at risk. So we can talk through those things with people.
Well, it must be very fulfilling to be doing such a job and helping so many people. Just finally, what is that like? What is that like to be there helping people who are in strife?
Well, I'll just share a personal story. I actually, financial counselling approached me to come on board to help set up the line very quickly back in 2019. And I was only going to be with them for 3 months to do that. And here I am in 2023 because the work is so rewarding.
And there's so much of it.
There is so much of it. I'm not a financial counsellor on the line. I'm running the team, but huge admiration for the people who work on the line and the compassion they have for the people they're working with.
That was Helen Davis, General Manager of the Small Business Debt Helpline. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.